Okay. This disgustingness is my sourdough starter that's been neglected for the last 8 months. I already poured off some of the hooch, but that's that gray stuff, that gray alcohol water in there. Get you some. And what I'm going to do is scrape off the top layer and then try to get down to this stuff that has been not exposed to oxygen. And that's really all that is. This has been exposed to oxygen, so it's oxidated. And then the hooch is gray and yucky because it is. But we're going to get a clean jar and treat this a little better. I feel like I'm ready to get back into making sourdough. So first steps first is I should have a sourdough jar of some sort around here. So let me go find that because I did not prepare. Okay, so I'm having to reorganize my whole entire life just to get a jar for this. Okay. But once we have our jar secured, the next step is relatively easy. I mean, as many times as I've done this in my life, usually it happens postpartum, post-baby. It's usually when I tackle this feat of redoing my sourdough starter. Okay. That is some thick stuff, let me tell you. All right, so we're gonna do equal parts flour, water, and starter. And when I say equal parts, measure with your heart, because that's what I do. So I probably should have measured, but like I said, this is fine, everything's fine. All right, and then what I do is I just make it like a thick sort of pancakey batter. And then we're gonna feed and discard this every single day until it starts to bubble and rise. So I'm gonna have to add a little bit more water to that. There we go. And so I just try to get it like a thick pancake batter, essentially. And I just add a little bit of water at a time, mix it up. A little bit more water at a time. Just a dab more. But like I said, if you're unsure, you can use a scale and just put your jar on and tare your jar, then add your starter, and then add equal parts flour and water. That's just a general rule of thumb. You're not going to mess it up if you do more or less of any of those items. You just want to kind of make sure that your consistency is like, that's about the consistency that I'm doing right now. You could go a little bit more on the thicker side, actually, and I might add more starter in here just to accomplish that, make it a little thicker. Or flour, you can add more flour. But I'm hopeful, this starter is pretty dead, but I'm hopeful with a proper feed that it'll come back alive. So maybe we'll check this in a little bit and see where we're at as far as there's no bubbles. There's not going to be bubbles today. Today there's no, oh, make sure that you get all the dry bits. Go all the way around the bottom of your jar and get all the dry bits. But yeah, we're going to check this. It's going to take a few days. I'm going to be honest with you. It's going to take a few days to get it where we need it to be so that we can ferment a large enough quantity of dough. So we want it to be really bubbly, really active before we make dough. And that's going to take some time to bring this starter back to life. But I'm going to leave it right here on my counter. I'm going to put a lid on it. And you can cover it with like a coffee filter or whatever. I'm just going to cover mine with this plastic lid loosely, not tight, just loose. I don't want bugs or anything to get into it, but I also want it to be able to breathe and get oxygen. But use your discretion. Some people cover it with towels or whatever. I find that it dries out my starter and then it doesn't do as well. This is feed number 2 and it's already super bubbly. It's almost doubled, but it hasn't even been a full 12 hours yet. So I would say that it's almost active, or should be active enough now to make bread or pizza dough or whatever baked goods you want to make. And that is after sitting in the fridge for 6 to 8 months, and probably closer to 8 months. Yep, there she is. Beautiful bubbly starter again. All right, I'm gonna put this in the fridge overnight because I'm not gonna be able to bake bread this weekend, so I'm gonna refrigerate it, and we will deal with it after this weekend. All right, let's put together some sourdough bread. The first thing you have to do is the night before you want to start your bread dough, you've got to make a leaven. So what I have in that glass bowl back there is a leaven. Now to make that for one batch of sourdough, I've doubled it, but to make a single batch of sourdough that yields 2 loaves of bread, you're going to do 75 grams of water, 75 grams of starter, and 75 grams of flour. You're going to mix all that up, cover it, and leave it on the countertop overnight. And the next day, your leaven should be nice and bubbly to the point when you add your water for your dough, your leaven should float on top of the water. So I am making a double batch, but I am going to give you all of the measurements for and when I say double batch, it could make 4 loaves of bread potentially, or a bunch of pizza dough, whatever. But I'm going to give you the measurements for a 2 loaf batch of bread, or my single batch, what I call my single batch, my normal batch of bread. But you're going to see I'm making a whole bunch extra here. So that leaven that I made, that was doubled, but I gave you the measurements for the single batch. All right, so what I did was I measured 950 grams of water into my leaven, but you're going to do 425 grams of water in your leaven. So single batch goes 425 grams of water goes into your leaven, and mix that up. And then in a separate bowl, we're going to do 700 grams of flour. And you're going to see I'm measuring 14 because it's doubled. So 450 grams of water, 700 grams of flour, and your leaven. You're going to mix all of those things together. I've got this large mixing bowl, and we are going to mix it together. Now, I have found that putting my liquid ingredients into my bowl first mixes up much better, but on this day, I did things backwards because, hey, it's my first time making a loaf of sourdough or a batch of sourdough in over 8 months. So I've done things a little backwards here, but it does mix better if you put your liquid ingredients in first and then your dry ingredients in last. That way all of your dry ingredients get mixed in and they're not down at the bottom of your bowl still dry, which is what happens unless you get in there with a mixing spoon and scrape down your sides and mix it up. With all of the ingredients, not all of them, because I'm going to tell you something here in just a second, but with those ingredients in the bowl, we are going to mix this up into a shaggy dough. We don't want to over mix this right now. That's not the goal. We're just going to mix it up into a shaggy dough and let it rest for about 30 minutes. While that mixes and rests, we are going to make our salt water that we're going to add to this in just a minute. To make the salt water, you're going to mix 50 grams of water with 20 grams of salt, and you're going to get that mixed up so that it dissolves nicely while your dough is resting, and then we're going to mix it into our dough. After the dough rests for 30 minutes, usually I put a wet flour sack towel on top of my dough so that it's not drying out, but once it rests for 30 minutes, we're adding in our salted water, and we're going to squish that around and get that mixed in, and then we're going to let it rest for another 30 minutes. Then we're going to start our stretch and folds, or if you'd like, you can just knead your dough for 15 minutes in the mixer. But I like to do stretch and folds because that allows the dough to absorb all the moisture, and I like the way that the dough turns out better. It's just the way I've always done it. I like to do my stretch and folds in a separate glass bowl. I'm going to take all of this dough out of this container, out of this mixing bowl, and put it in a glass bowl for the rest of my stretch and folds after I let it mix for just a bit in this mixer. I made my dough too late, so we're going to pop it in the fridge overnight just to slow down the fermentation process and deal with it tomorrow. Second, this is how I wrap up my bread dough to sit overnight, and I did refrigerate this just to retard the fermentation process, and it slows down the fermentation process. You can see there's lots of condensation in there, but that's to keep my bread moist, keep it wrapped up. And now we're gonna take it out and take a look at it. This is our bubbly bread. Lots of bubbles. And I'm gonna do a couple of stretch and folds, get it warmed back up and get it going again. And then we're gonna separate it out and put it into, in about an hour, I'm gonna divvy this up and divvy it up into the portions that we're gonna be using this evening and tomorrow. So tomorrow I'm gonna bake bread. And some of this is gonna be used for pizza dough. One of my favorite tools to use for sourdough is my rice paddle that I got with my very first Instant Pot. This thing is amazing. It works really well at scraping bowls because of its rounded shape, and it's flexible enough and stiff enough that you can use it to help move your dough. So I really like to use that if you need something to help you in the kitchen. Use your rice paddle. It's great. This bread dough has been fermenting overnight in the refrigerator. It still continues to ferment even though it's cold. It just kind of slows down the fermentation process. You can see as I'm stretching and folding it, you can see the texture of the dough. There's lots of bubbles in here. This is fermented really well. I'm just stretching and folding it now to give it some shape. Stretching and folding builds the gluten structure, which is going to help with your window pane test. I don't typically do a window pane test, but when I do make the pizza, you are going to see how much I stretch this dough, and you can see through it. There is a window pane test in that process, but I've gotten to the point now when I make sourdough that I just know by the feel of the dough when it's ready to be shaped up into its bowls, when it's ready to be shaped and stored for pizza dough. Right now, I'm just punching down and getting rid of some of the gigantic bubbles in this dough. I typically like to squeeze out the larger bubbles because I don't like big holes in my bread. I feel like when it has the bigger bubbles for my kids, it's a mess. The jelly falls through, the butter falls through. It just ends up being a mess. But I let that dough sit for 30 minutes after stretching and folding it, and now you can see just how alive this dough is. It's filled with bubbles. It is super squishy, and it is time now for me to divvy it up into its different sizes, what I'm going to be using it for, but you can see it is very well proved, and I need to get this sorted and put back into the refrigerator for its last ferment to give it its optimal sourdough flavor. This dough could go ahead and be baked right now, but I'm trying to develop the sourdough flavor in it a little more, so I'm going to do we're going to shape this dough, and then we're going to let it ferment a little bit more. We're going to do its final ferment. What it's been doing now is what's called the bulk ferment. So you'll hear a lot of bakers, sourdough bakers, talk about the bulk ferment. And well, that's what I've been doing overnight with this batch of dough. It's just been bulk fermenting all together like in this one big blob. So we remove the sourdough from the bowl, and now we are going to divvy it up. You can use a scale for this part of the process if you want your loaves to all be perfectly the same size. I used to use a scale when I divvied up sourdough for my micro bakery. I used to bake sourdough for my community when I lived down in Southern Oregon. I have not started doing that here yet. I don't have a community up here yet, but down in Klamath Falls, I knew so many people, and I was able to make lots of bread for lots of folks. And maybe we'll do that again, maybe not. Right now I'm just making sourdough for my family, but if you need some extra income and if you get really good at baking sourdough, then you could start a little micro bakery in your community. And I used to sell my loaves. I started out selling them for $5, and as time went on, inflation, etc., I was selling my loaves for $7 a loaf. And people did not bat an eye at that. They loved sourdough, and they loved to buy sourdough every week. So it was quite a good little side income for me to do for my family. I've always hustled. I've always found ways to bring in extra income for my family, and I don't always talk about it on this channel. But some of the things that I have done in the past while working from home, living at home and taking care of my babies, is selling sourdough. I also did a lot of postpartum doula work. That was something I was able to schedule around my family. And postpartum doula work is basically going into a new mother's home and taking care of the mother, taking care of her baby, taking care of things that they need done around the house, helping with simple cooking, simple cleaning, simple homemaking tasks so that mom can rest and bond with baby. Postpartum
postpartum work also included placenta encapsulation and things of that nature, but we won't go into too much detail since we are doing a cooking vlog here today. But I just want to give you some ideas in case you are a mother or a stay-at-home mom that is looking for some extra ways to earn cash for your family with the holidays coming up. I also used to make and sell elderberry syrup and a variety of herbal blends and concoctions from my apothecary for teas for new mothers and for pregnant women. So I would make a first trimester blend, second trimester, and third trimester blend, and I would sell those teas in my community. And I also made elderberry syrups, and there's recipes for that. Elderberries, you might still be able to find some elderberries to harvest. If not, you can purchase dehydrated elderberries and make elderberry syrup for your community. That was something that I would make, and I sold that $20 per pint jar, and then I would do quart jars for $35 just to give folks a little bit of a deal. And my pints and quarts of elderberry sold very, very well. Lots of people in my community, in my previous community, purchased those items. Again, since we've moved, I have not dove back into cottage home products. That is what these items are. You can have a cottage bakery, and you can sell products from your home. Just look into the laws and all that kind of stuff. I was doing it for friends. Most of the people that I made goods for were friends of mine in the community, so I wasn't actually setting up a farmer's market table and selling like that. I was doing individual sales to my friends. Leave your helpful comments down below. What can folks do to make some extra money in this season where everything is costing an astronomical amount of money? Survival is key. What are you doing to make some extra money and to make ends meet around your house? Let's help each other out. Please, no MLMs. Don't suggest any MLMs down in the comments. Let's suggest things that are actually feasible and that don't have a large upfront cost. Okay, back to bread baking. You see, I have divvied up my bread. I did not use a scale. I just eyeballed it because I'm making this for my family. And it doesn't matter if the sizes of loaves are different. So what I've done here is I've further divided up more dough to make pizza rolls. So that's why you see the little individual rolls of dough. Those are going to be for pizza rolls for my daughter's birthday. That is what she requested for her birthday lunch. So that's what we're going to do. After I shaped up all of the bread, I covered it with a damp towel just to let it rest for 30 minutes, just to let all those gluten fibers that were formed to rest up. And then we're going to do the final shaping, or in this case, I am turning these rolls into pizza rolls. So you can see I am stretching that dough out, and I didn't do a window pane test, but I can get this dough super thin and it's still going to hold its structure. And then we're adding some mozzarella and some pepperonis to the middle of these rolls and pulling up the dough around to the top and then flipping them over into a muffin tin to make our little pizza rolls. You could also put these on a cookie sheet, but I'm just putting these in a muffin tin just to help them hold their shape. And now we're to the final shaping of our sourdough bowls. I have put down some flour. I'm going to scoop up this round of dough, flip it over, and do 4 stretch and folds, or whatever I deem necessary to give this bread some structure. You might see me do a little bit extra with this. I might roll it up. Oh yeah, I'm going to roll it up. It didn't have enough tension, so I'm giving it more tension. So I've rolled it sideways, and now what am I going to do? Am I going to roll it again? So let's be honest here. I may have let this dough overprove more than I normally would. It might be just a little bit floppy, saggy because of how long I've let it prove. Now, sourdough is forgiving, but you do not want to overproof your dough. That means it turns into a mushy, soupy mess. It has eaten up all the food, or the little bugs in the dough, the little sourdough bugs, the yeast bugs. They have eaten up all the sugars in the dough and gassed them all out, and it's made your dough floppy and liquidy and have no shape or structure. That's okay. You can turn it into some flat bread or whatever. I have not quite gotten to that point with my dough, but it is a tad overproofed. So we are going to stretch and fold it and try to get it to shape up into a firm or a structured ball of dough. And then what I do to help that as well is I wrap it tightly in fabric, and fabric helps it maintain its shape for the final ferment. We are going to put this in the refrigerator overnight, or at least for 3 to 6 hours minimal. But I typically do my bread overnight so it gets nice and chilled. It holds its shape a lot better when I flip it into the pot in the oven to cook. So that is why I do it this way. A lot of people just flip it into a basket and let it sit there like that, but I've always wrapped mine up in fabric to give it extra tension, extra structure. That's just the way I've always done it, but other people do it differently. Do what works for you. Sourdough, as I've said before, is forgiving, and everybody finds their rhythm and their method with their sourdough. So you just have to do what works for you, and don't give up. If you start making sourdough, you're learning how to make sourdough. Once you learn its forgiveness, that is when you will succeed at sourdough, because you know how it works, you know its limits, and you'll be able to work with it and make your dough, your bread, just fine. You'll learn as time goes on. So when I first started making sourdough bread, I didn't have a clue, and I was making hockey pucks that tasted delicious, and everybody was happy with that. But over time, I got better and better and better, and well, this batch isn't going to turn out the greatest because I'd overproofed it a little, but it turned out great for the pizza rolls, and it's just a little bit flatter than I would like when I baked my bread, but it's still good. It's still tasty. It's not a hockey puck. It did rise. It did poof up in my Dutch oven. Sourdough is pretty forgiving, however, you do not want to overprove it, and that is somewhat easy to do. You have a timeline to work with your sourdough before it starts to overprove. And there is sort of a fine line, but as you work with your sourdough, you will learn that. It is also based off of your environment. So on days when we have the wood stove going, my sourdough is going to prove a lot quicker than on days when we have our electric heat going and the house isn't as warm. So there are factors to consider. That's why my sourdough baking experience in my house, in my altitude, in my home, in my environment is going to be slightly different than your method and technique that works for you in your environment, but it's not going to vary too much. It's going to be pretty similar, and you will learn as you go. As I got better at baking sourdough bread, I started posting my loaves online on my social media. I was just posting pictures of it, and eventually people started asking if I could bake them bread, and ultimately it turned into a micro bakery situation where I was making weekly drops of bread for my community, and I was earning a little bit of an income. And making an income as a stay-at-home mom is rewarding for the mother and for the whole family. I have a few ideas for how stay-at-home moms can make money. The micro bakery selling sourdough bread or baked goods is one way you can do it. Also, other cottage goods that are made in your kitchen, such as jams, jellies, other baked goods. Simple sewing projects like baby blankets with minky fabric and flannel can be made very easily and sold for $15, $20 a pop. In the past, I have made elderberry syrup, and I sold that for $20 a pint or $35 a quart. I was able to make 8 sourdough loaves at a time baked fresh, and I would sell those for $7 each. Some ideas for doing a little bit of work out of the house are office cleaning, house cleaning services. Also, birth and postpartum work can be somewhat flexible. The birth part isn't very flexible, but the postpartum work can be flexible, and you're providing a service to a mother working in her home, helping make her life easier so she can bond with her baby. Pick up dirty and drop off clean, iron, folded, starched laundry services. Drop your side hustle recommendations down below in the comments, and let's help each other out. Let's help everyone earn some extra money this holiday season. I chopped up some garlic and put it in some butter, microwaved it for about 30 seconds to get it nice and melty and delicious. We put some parsley in it, and that is what I'm drizzling over the top of these pizza rolls. And we're going to go ahead and serve these up for my daughter's birthday lunch. I thought it was going to be a birthday dinner, but it's just the way it worked out. It's birthday lunch, and everybody was happy. These were delicious. We served them with a little bit of pizza sauce on the side, and it filled some bellies. And this is the next morning, bright and early in the morning. I have turned my oven on to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, yes, and I baked those pizza rolls. Gosh, I can't even tell you what I baked them. I probably baked those pizza rolls at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 20-25 minutes. And then this, the oven is preheated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I have my Dutch oven with a lid on in my oven, getting preheated as well. And then what we're gonna do is score this bread, that is putting a slice in it with a razor blade or a sharp knife so that it can rise and poof up nicely. You've got to score the bread so that it doesn't crack organically and wonky. You don't have to score it, but by scoring it, you're giving it that room that it needs to open up and to rise, to poof up, to spring up, as they call it. You want your oven spring, which is how your dough responds to being put in a hot Dutch oven. You get that oven spring. So we put this into a hot Dutch oven, a cast iron Dutch oven, and that is going to create its own little mini oven. And what is going to happen is the dough, the moisture in the dough is going to hit the heat of the Dutch oven with the lid on and everything, and the moisture in there is going to steam this dough. It's going to make it rise and poof up into a poofy ball of dough. There you go. And we cook that for 15 minutes at 500 degrees. And then we're going to turn our heat down to 425 and cook it for 10 more minutes. And after those 10 minutes, remove the lid and bake for a further 5 to 10 minutes until the bread is golden and until you thump it on the bottom and it sounds hollow. You want your bread to sound hollow on the bottom. And you can see here, my bread is kind of melting. It is definitely overproofed. You can see that loaf in the back. It is a beautiful loaf of bread, but it's a little bit flatter than I would normally like. And you can tell this loaf of bread, once I dumped it out onto my parchment paper, it started to melt. And what I mean by melt is it just started to lose its shape. It's just a tad bit overproofed, but that's okay. It's still going to turn out beautifully. I biffed my sourdough baking schedule just a little bit, and that happens sometimes, but hey, if all else fails, turn it into pizza dough. So admittedly, I got a little distracted yesterday and overproofed my dough, but it's not flat as a pancake. But you can see it's gonna have lots of bubbles. Lots of bubbles. It'll be delicious. We're gonna slice into it after it cools for a bit.
And you crush it and then you show how it bounces back. Boing, boing.
Have a big piece.
I want a big piece. Take her to big bowl.
Well, guess what?
Oh, where's the butter? I got a new thing of butter out.
So this?
You guys also have to have some eggs or something, right? Do you want some eggs with your sourdough?
Sure. That's nice. Sure. Oh, it's warm.
Not on mine. I don't like butter on that bread. It's really good. I have sized it before.
For more sourdough recipes and for a better explanation of this recipe, check out my sourdough playlist. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.